My name is Andrew Julius Bende. For really quick introductions, I come from the Bioinnovation Institute. And in a way, I could have made a mistake to come here alone because we should have come. I have a few people that are a bit a notch higher than me that should have come first, but I'll call them up to the stage, and then we start this off. Dr. Julius and Ian, please join me on the stage, and we do a quick introduction. Please come and join, and let's. Everyone is scared of this stage, but it's not burning. It's not burning. Do we know if our slides are on? If you can help me start those while I give a quick introduction. As I said, I'm from the Bioinnovation Institute, and we are co-organizing this event with two other partners. I'll give them a quick, just say a quick name, and then when the slides, yeah, I can start before you guys introduce yourself. So the program, as you must have received it, will have three kind of parts. The first part is this very quick short introduction, and then we will move into 2 sessions of discussion. Very practical examples of some of our collaborators that are working in the space of the African Union, European Union collaboration, not necessarily on the innovation agenda, but then we will dive into a bigger session where we discuss the innovation agenda. But the Bioinnovation Institute, for a very quick, we are an incubator down in Copenhagen. Actually, we like to use the word ecosystem developer, and that will come up in the keynote where my colleague will be taking us on the journey of what we've done in Copenhagen. If I get the next slide, I don't have the clicker with me. While the Bioinnovation Institute works mainly in Copenhagen and therefore has the framework for working in Copenhagen, in Denmark, and with a slight reach. And where do I point this? There. Okay, good. And with a slight reach into other European countries, we do not have a specific framework for working here. So 1 year ago, we started went away again. We started the Global Markets Initiative, and the Global Markets Initiative is our first vehicle, real vehicle, framework for working in especially low and middle income countries, and we are changing that name to emerging markets because we want to see these as markets. As you heard most of the morning, we can't work only on grants. We have to build markets and ecosystems. And what we do there is to try and bridge the 2 ecosystems, the Danish ecosystem, but also the East African ecosystem especially, and India. And here we are starting with Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and Rwanda, and Kenya is our first real presence. Some of the initiatives we've done, and we've intentionally started with the box on top, the Global Bioeconomy Summit. This is probably one of our first interventions here as Bioinnovation Institute, where we have collaborated with BioInnovate. In a minute we'll hear about BioInnovate, to see what is here, what can we do here, what kind of mandate can we build as BII collaborating in this space to do something, as you'll hear from Arnold later, what we do in Copenhagen. But also putting that a little bit higher, not just Denmark and collaboration with Kenya, but the European Union in collaboration with East Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa for the longer term. And we do a few more things. We have given away some grants to some of our companies in Copenhagen to come out and do clinical trials, technological validations in in line with, can we start partnerships across the two ecosystems? So people start collaborating for development of this dual objective of both sustaining business, building businesses that sustain themselves, but also contributing to wide-scale social impact. Another part we are looking at is how do we increase country exchanges, either on academic level, but also on venture building, innovation level, where people go from this side to the other side to learn. And these days we have other tools that we can use in that direction. And another part is we are really interested in building knowledge. So people will tell, people that have talked to us in the last few days, I can come and say, well, we do this and we are the best at this, but we are not the best here. We don't even know how things function. So we actually want a localized form of doing that. We are building knowledge on how we can thrive here and what we can contribute. And maybe we don't even need to be here ourselves. Maybe we need collaborators that are already on the ground that can do this. And this is a very good example of what could happen, this event. And I will just highlight our mandate comes from, as you saw in the announcement of the event, the AU-EU Innovation Agenda. We love this mandate. And again, our keynote speaker will talk a little bit into this because it gives us a really good vehicle for making the case of this collaboration. And it's quite timely because we have to both develop the research and innovation ecosystem while putting in resources and mechanisms for building the entire ecosystem value chain. So we shorten the time of doing a lot of things in a siloed format to a more ecosystem approach to these things. And has also gives us the mandate to actually continuously together monitor and see what we can improve in this. And so that was the Bioinnovation Institute. Again, Andrew Julius Bende, Senior Associate in the Global Markets Initiative. I'm really excited to see what we can come out with today. I'll pass it to you, Ian. I think that's your slide out there. Okay. And then our boss will end.
Exactly. So my name is Ian. I'm an Executive Director and Partner at Growth Africa, which is an entrepreneur support organization. It's a little bit building on what Andrew said, and also an ecosystem builder. And I think we really, all of us, increasingly as we get older, realize that to really get the systemic change that we want, we really need these ecosystems of collaboration, not move beyond just the nice words that I think we all know about, really building both the bridges, the linkages, and the trust, and what it is that really forms the essence of what will make us move forward as we want. And then interesting enough, I've actually had the pleasure to work with Julius for 10 years plus, he says. And great to now have new people that we're bringing in and seeing what it is that we can do together.
Yeah, I don't know, it's still morning or good afternoon. So my name is Julius Echuru. I'm a principal scientist at the International Center of Insect Physiology and Ecology, and also manager for Bioinnovate Africa. So Bioinnovate Africa enables scientists to translate innovative biologically based ideas or inventions or technologies into, we call them practical solutions, using appropriate business models. So we take ideas from the lab to the market. And our approach is we provide grants, we also provide technical assistance, and then we work with the policy to move that forward. Now, the reason we do that is three things. One, this region, we believe, and most of sub-Saharan Africa is very rich in biological resources. We lose, first of all, when it comes to agriculture production, we lose about 40% pre-harvest because of low inputs and so on. And then we lose 40% post-harvest. Whether it's due to bad storage conditions or due to just consumption. If you take a pineapple or an orange here, you'll probably eat only 60% of it, but 40% is discarded as waste. So we see that as an opportunity. And then even for the small bio or agro-processing, which is there, it's heavily polluting. If you go to some of these industries, if you consider like slaughterhouses, abattoirs, or juice making companies, the pollution is so bad. So they are always fighting with the environmental regulators, and some of them have been forced to close. So we think we see an opportunity there, and we worked with Ian to move some of the technologies that solve these problems. And then the second thing is East Africa and most of Africa. If you look at the private sector, it's about maybe 60–70% is informal, the informal sector. If you move out, for those of you who are visiting Nairobi for the first time, or if you just move out of this gate, you'll see a lot of informal businesses. And these are micro, small scale. And if you go deeper into those businesses, you find maybe they are not, you don't get professors, or you don't get many scientists leading those businesses. So we believe, we have a philosophy in BioInnovate where we believe that the only way to grow in the bioeconomy, which is scientifically intensive, is to encourage our scientists at master's, PhD, or undergrad to go into business. When I was growing up, business was for people who have failed school. But I think in the new economy, business is not for people who have failed school. There's a gentleman here, Albert. Albert, are you in the room? Yeah. He told me, I didn't know, he went for his PhD, and instead of going back to work for Rwanda government, he decided to establish his own company. So I think for us, we call them entrepreneurial scientists. Now, lastly, I like what, we are also ecosystem builders, and what you mentioned. It's one thing to say we want to support research, we want to support technologies, but I tell you, if the ecosystem is not functional, nothing will go to market. So we believe, just like our names almost reflect with my brother here, I think building the ecosystem, innovation ecosystem, is the way forward. So the approach we use is also the approach that BioInnovation Institute uses. And by the way, we just came to know each other less than.
They stole our name. they stole our name.
Yeah, but
and your name as well.
And your name, so yeah. So we didn't know, but we all believe that the best way to build ecosystems is by doing it practically. So that's what we do. We provide the grants, we provide the technical assistance, we work with the institutions. As you do these projects, as you move them to market, what are the challenges along that pathway? And how do we come in to work with you, go creatively to address those challenges? Once we do that, we're actually strengthening the ecosystem. And when we get to the level of Denmark, then things will just be, flowing nicely. And that's our vision, and that's our dream. Thank you.
All right. No, you didn't steal our name. We actually met, and we were discussing. And I remember when I was talking with Julius, Ian introduced the two of us, and we met on a Zoom call, and he started talking about BioInnovate. I said, I come from BioInnovation Institute. He says, I come from BioInnovate. I said, say it again. What are you saying? Did you repeat what I said? And then, no, it's BioInnovate. Oh, okay. Oh, all right. Okay. So what do you do? Then he says, no, we are within the bioeconomy, and we are doing this bioeconomy summit in October. And say, bioeconomy, Julius, what's bioeconomy? And when he mentioned what they were doing, I thought that's what we do. Isn't that what we do? So for us, that's as new as some of these terms are. All of us, and I'm sure this room is full of experts in all different kinds of technologies or venture processes or financing that are all looking for something in that direction. But we do not convene enough to try and put words and practice and shake hands and look each other in the face to say, what can we do from here to the next 10 years plus? So we are gathering, we gathered this session to that when we finish today, we can have 3-5 points that we can start working on tomorrow. Really. And the whole explanation of the event for us is, while we have the big umbrella, African Union, European Union Innovation Agenda, a lot of good words, how can we concretize and make that practical? We have companies that will go in all kinds of direction. I like what you say. You have the informal sector. That's the biggest. You have some of us in the university researching. You have some of us that have big monies, creating big companies. How do you connect the dots without remaining in silos? And I like the term, the mantra, let's stop talking about public-private partnerships and start creating and doing public-private partnerships. Gentlemen and ladies, I hope we have a good discussion. I hope you allow me to introduce our keynote speaker, my colleague, Arnold Cloke. Arnold is a senior associate in the Bioinnovation Institute, formerly Business Development Department, now Venture Building Department. Yeah, let me give him the.
Yeah. All right. Andrew, thanks for introducing me. Which one is it? I was thank you for introducing me. I'll continue the introduction and go a bit deeper into what it is that I actually do in the organization. Just on a very high level, Andrew is working with our Global Markets Initiative. He's exploring opportunities in Eastern Africa, India, basically anywhere outside of Europe. I personally work with a focus on Denmark and I would say Scandinavia specifically, and in a team that is responsible for finding interesting and cool technology in university that can be spun out as a potential startup. We assess said startup and fund it, and in the end I'm lucky enough to work with a number of the startups that we end up funding. Today I'm going to take you through a little bit of what it is that we do at the Bioinnovation Institute and how we've built an ecosystem in Denmark over the past, I would say, 7 years. And I will end up with maybe a couple of thoughts on what it is that we might be able to do concrete in Africa already. But I would mainly like to open up the floor to discussion about what is it that you see that makes sense. Because I can think about your ecosystem. I've not lived your ecosystem. You know best where the gaps lie. And today for me is finding out where those gaps are and where we fit in the best and where we can basically help build. Where do I? Okay, so a little bit about the Bioinnovation Institute here. We are one of Europe's largest life science accelerators at this point, and we've been founded by the Novo Nordisk Foundation. We are therefore a non-for-profit institute, and we've been established in a back office of said Novo Nordisk Foundation in 2018, being about 4 to 5 people back then, running some very early stage acceleration programs. Ever since, we've done well, and in turn, we've been rewarded with about 470 million euros in a grant from said Novo Nordisk Foundation to start building this organization and start investing in the Danish life science innovation ecosystem. Since then, we've done quite well. We've grown the organization to about 60 people now, and we've gone on to fund about, this slide says 112 startups, but we're in the process of finalizing another 10 to 20 investments this year to grow that number to about 132. We have funded them with approximately 140 million euros, and they have in turn managed to generate additional investments which come down to about 661 million euros. So that for us is a stamp of approval from the market that what we've done has made sense, and that investing in companies like this that are looking for innovative biosolutions for practical problems in areas related to health, agriculture, or food makes sense, both from, let's say, a humanitarian sustainability perspective, but also from a market perspective. Going on, it's back. Other one? There we go. So maybe a bit about where we as the Bio-Innovation Institute fit in. We've been called into life because the Novo Foundation believed that there was a big gap between science originating in laboratories or at lab benches and actually how that gets translated into actionable, viable startups that can basically apply for seed and Series A funding from institutional investors. There was a translational gap there. We've been trying to fill that by helping these startups both by funding them, but also by actively guiding academics, university professors, scientists, anybody with an innovative idea that has trouble making that first step to market. And that is where we fit in this overall ecosystem. So if you look at the slide, we started university and bridged the gap to venture capital. So how do we actually do this? As I mentioned before, we work closely together with both universities, hospitals. We also work closely together with industry and sourcing great ideas and technologies that we are able to spin out as companies to then take those into either of the 3 programs that you see on this slide. We have a venture track, which is a venture lab program and a venture house program in which we focus on the earliest stages of startups that are just at the cusp of being ready to being translated from university to an actual incorporated company. We fund them through convertible loan up over the course of the entire journey that can be up to approximately 1.9 million euros. And we, besides providing them with funding, I'll go into it as a little bit deeper later, we provide them with guidance, both from a business perspective, how do they need to develop their business case and how do they frame it, but we also provide them with, let's say, personal guidance, acknowledging the potential challenges that you face spinning out of academia and having to take on a new mantle of startup executive. We translate these into companies in both human and planetary health. I'll be focusing on what we call planetary health today. My personal focus area is mostly food and agricultural technology companies, so that will be the scope. This is a short slide showing what we've achieved. I've already gone over this. So startups have raised a lot of funding, about 6 times more than we've put in. But most importantly, they've also generated about 735 new job opportunities without counting the organizations that they work together with. So going a bit deeper into, just to give you a little bit of flavor on the examples of what it is that we look into. As I said, human and planetary health, but I'll go into my focus area, which is planetary health. On a high level, we look into food technologies, agricultural technologies, green chemicals, alternative biomaterials, carbon capturing and energy solutions, and also, most recently, technologies that enable these other fields to be developed in a much more efficient way. As an example, within food technologies, there's lots of rationale, and I think we're all aware why we should be looking at this. But in terms of the companies that we have, we've looked at companies running enzymatic solutions to produce alternative cheese, fermentation-based solutions to produce alternative meats, and cultivated fish fat cells for alternative fish products, up until the point where we go to, let's say, alternative ways to produce non-sustainable plant-based oils. A couple to highlight here, which I think have been the biggest success stories in the BII. We've had Evodia Bio, which is basically making beer brewing a lot more sustainable by having an alternative to hops, their proprietary hops. The company that I just mentioned before, it's called Ferm, an enzymatic solution to create actually good tasting and good texturized plant-based cheese out of alternative sources than, let's say, conventional dairy. And Matter Foods, which is a company that uses fungal fermentation to produce a tasty meat alternative and therewith, in a way, decentralize the food market. What are we interested in? Hybrid food products, products with enhanced nutritional content, so feeding more people with less. And we're also heavily looking into, let's say, genetically manipulated pro foods. Another example is agricultural technology, equally important. And here we mostly revert back to nature, looking at the microbes that, for example, make up soil composition, and looking at them to learn how we can best produce, let's say, novel fertilizers or solutions that help crops thrive in dry or high salinity environments. A couple of standouts here, a company called Agrobiomics looking for biostimulants to do exactly that. They stimulate crops to grow in very high salinity environments, also often in the absence of water. And Sundew, which is developing microbial-based anti-pesticides for water-based pests, who are actually currently running or looking into starting to run their first field trials right here in Africa. In the future of AgTech, we're looking at genetically edited crops for climate resilient crops, so that is changing specific traits to help the crops that we need thrive in an ever-changing climate. Precision agriculture through various synthetic biology procedures, and a lot about microbial enhanced diversity to get soil to thrive. I can hear you thinking, that's a lot about what have we done, and it probably all sounds very cool, but how does that potentially apply to what is happening here and what you're doing here? For that reason, I've decided to focus on how we see an ecosystem best built and how we've done it. And afterwards, I'll try to go into some concrete examples of how I could see that potentially translated. I'm happy for anybody to challenge that, by the way, to the African ecosystem over here. So if we look at an ecosystem, there's 4 main pillars that we've found of utmost importance. One of them being funding, obviously. Without funding, we're not going to move anywhere. Networks, knowledge platforms, and the right infrastructure to thrive and grow. Zooming in on networks first, there's a multitude of networks that we've set up over the years, and a multitude of networks that help our startups find either the right people, the right knowledge, or the right tools to continue their growth trajectory. So this is both the enablement of conferences and networking events, which do not only not only get, let's say, scientists and academics together, but combining that with policymakers, industry, the investment industry, getting them all together to share ideas and knowledge about how we should shape the future of our bioeconomy that we're here to talk about today. We have very strong ties with universities throughout Denmark. We need to be active at these universities. One of the main challenges that we've seen is translating science from university into actionable startups. And to do so, we need to be present, we need to be visible, and we need to have the ties to be exposed to the people that want to innovate, but also have the opportunity to educate about entrepreneurship and innovation as a viable career path outside of academia. Other than that, we work very closely together with a network of other accelerators and incubators in Copenhagen, in Denmark, that facilitate pretty much the same things that we do with different levels, but it's good to all have a holistic view of the companies that are out there and at which stages we can all help each other. Other than that, there's a bunch of local organizations and networks. I won't bother to go into the specific names of each, but these are organizations that either spend time on getting the right parts of the ecosystem together, so getting startups from one side of the country introduced to startups from the other side of the country to facilitate knowledge sharing. These are networks or companies that provide certain types of infrastructure, either in the form of laboratory space or space to, for example, scale a production process to a point where you could say you've reached a proper pilot scale, and investors could come in. Going into local here, which could just as well be, going to global here, which could just as well be global. I think one of the most important things that we've set up is our investor network within the context of Denmark and Europe. This is a network of investors that we've gotten together to actively engage with our startups, not only from the pure perspective of, cool, you can see our startups and you can potentially fund them, but also from the perspective of, you're aware that these startups are super early stage. They might not be ready for you to invest in right now, but we would like you to be part of their journey and would like you to advise them on what it is that they should be developing into. So giving a bit of that industry perspective to help sort of aim the needle for each startup in the right direction for a efficient and continued growth trajectory. There's a lot of global, local, Europe-wide key opinion leaders, experts in all kinds of different areas that we utilize to get our startups to the people that need, to the people that have the knowledge that they need to continue their growth. There's virtual and online events that we host. I think most notably, for example, one of our, it's a big CEO get-together in which you get all the CEOs of all the different startups that we have in our portfolio to come talk and share about specific challenges, issues, or accomplishments that they've achieved over the past years, to share, for example, in the knowledge about what does it actually take to negotiate and make a deal with an investor. What does good look like? What are the right terms for me and for other companies? And having a bit of that as a platform to share knowledge within our portfolio. There's lots of other collaborations and partnerships, but I think I'm blabbing on a little bit, so I'll try to go on to the next one, which is infrastructure. Very, very short. What we provide as BAI is we provide internally, we provide lab space, we provide office space for startups to be present in, do experiments, get the data that they need to eventually convince investors to take over and help them to get to the next level. But as obvious as it is space that is needed and it's not always present. Other than that, we have certain types of relationships with people that allow for scaling facilities. If we're talking about, for example, biofermentation processes, at one point you're going to need to move away from your 5-liter fermenter and you would like to go into 20, maybe even 100. We can do that in our basement, and therefore that we need partners. Same thing globally. There we look more at different types of contract manufacturing organizations, CDMOs, that can either consult our startups or facilitate some of the production that they need to do. And as an organization, we try to have attractive bonds or attractive partnerships with them, which, for example, could provide our startups with more favorable terms, as you would say. Thirdly, and I think maybe most importantly, is a big part is knowledge exchange. So a big part of my job is what we at BI call is being an anchor. My colleagues all have a background either from the investment industry, startup industry, or specific field-related knowledge for specific startups. And we work very closely together with our portfolio startups and with potentially applying candidates for any of our programs to start guiding them on what it means to shape a business case, and also to start teaching in a way how you can communicate a very complex technology in a way that makes sense in the eyes of people who look through it, who look at it through a business lens. Other than that, we provide them with the right tools, we connect them to the right people in the ecosystem, and basically function as a main point of contact and as an initial, let's say, beacon at the start. Other than that, we provide knowledge sharing platforms. This is access to mentors all over the place, anybody that we deem relevant for the startups that work in, let's say, the specific fields that we have interest in. And thirdly, and I think also most effectively, it's founder-to-founder sharing. We facilitate sharing between our own founders, so our own portfolio companies, both more matured and, let's say, more junior. But we also connect them to other startups that you would see throughout the Danish ecosystem to facilitate knowledge sharing and actually have people that have gone through the exact steps that they need to go through, advise them on their journey. I'd say, last but not least, we're going to talk about funding. I'll go over this one shortly, but last but not least, what we needed to see is all of the different steps of funding in the end need to be covered. From the earliest stages of scientific research, you're going to need grants to pay for research, be it small or big, but experiments need to be done and data needs to be gathered. Afterwards, we need people like ourselves to take science and innovation out of the hands of university and give it a first push, both in terms of infrastructure and help, but also in terms of funding, after which you have all of the different classical steps of venture investment funding that can help grow a company to a stage where, yeah, it's mature. This has all worked very well for us, and just as a first couple of ideas about how I could see some of this potentially translated to what is happening here, I would say one of the lower hanging fruits that I would see is gathering both relevant and right-minded investors in a group to form a similar investor network. And when I say right-minded, I mean investors that acknowledge the fact that there will be infrastructure that needs to be built. This will take a long time, as bio-innovation is unfortunately not a speed race. It's not a SaaS company or a B2B consumer product. This is real science. It needs developing, it needs de-risking, and we need investors that acknowledge that, and preferably locally, or investors from throughout the world who have a specific interest in the African Union, who can come together and start forming one of a network similar to what we have, and help guiding startups in a way that goes deeper than just providing funding. Other than that, there's a bit of policy that I personally think we should go through. This is not my area of expertise, and Andrew, I'm very sure that this is a lot more in your corner. But I personally believe that if we, as Europe or the Bio-Innovation Institute or Denmark, whatever you might want to call it, want to do this, you don't come just saying, this is our expertise, have it, let's do something with it. You need to come with some type of funding to back this up. Quickly going further, there's founder-by-founder sharing. I can envision a platform in which we have founders from Europe and from Africa actively communicating to both help identify what are the gaps or the challenges that you face in Africa, and how can we potentially help, share knowledge, and also for them to realize how could we potentially fit in our own innovations within your ecosystem. And in the end, I think that's most importantly what has been our central mission since the beginning. We can help bridge this gap from science to market by either providing advice, working with local organizations such as a BioInnovate, such as a Delta 40, and collectively work towards a system and guidance that makes sense for people to know what the steps are that they need to go through to build viable startups. I think that was over time, so I'll leave it at that. I hope this made sense. I'd very much like anybody who wants to challenge anything or has better ideas, more ideas, things you want to spar about, find me afterwards. And thank you for your time and attention. I'll hand this over to you.
Thank you so much. If there is one question, quick question, you can stay a little bit, or there is so many questions. And we don't have a lot of time. I said one. What happened?
Thank you, Arnold, for that presentation. Lots to learn from what you're doing on that side. So my only challenge stroke question, and I know it's not your question to answer, I think it's a broader conversation, is that you spoke about how you create an ecosystem to have thriving, innovations, research to the market. And you mentioned 4 things: infrastructure, funding, network, and knowledge, which is brilliant. I was hoping that in your presentation, in terms of the key things that can be, Euro PTC can be able to do, or indeed BII, you'd speak to the 4 aspects. I know you've spoken about networks and knowledge, but we do need funding and infrastructure. Thank you.
It's a difficult question to answer, and I think it's a very reasonable one. To be honest, like I said, it's a difficult question to answer, and it's a very reasonable one, and I very much acknowledge that there is a need to do that. The way that that is structured goes far above what I'm doing. I acknowledge the fact that, like, I tried to touch upon it a little bit, that there needs to be certain policies either from BI itself, either from different government institutes within Denmark and Europe that have this specific interest in Africa, to at one point back that up with some form of funding and some form of collaboration in terms of infrastructure. That would be the dream. How to achieve it? I think that's in the hands of policymakers, and me as a, let's say, lowly startup evaluator and a guy that works with startups can only dream about that. I'm happy to participate in, actively participate in conversations about this, but I think a start needs to be made by opening up that conversation internally at BII and actively scoping out who would be the parties from our side that would be willing to participate in that, be it a Nova Foundation, be it a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which we already have active collaboration in, and then finding the right framework in which we could deliver funding or infrastructure. Are we doing one more?
Hello. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was good. I have just some few comments. I also worked in the incubation space for a number of years as part of the Unibrain facility in Ghana. And one of the key lessons we learned was that technical support or business development services goes hand in hand with funding. You can't do one and leave the other, because then the startup or the SME is bound to fail. That is for the Ghana terrain and then also the African terrain, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know how yours work, but it's just an open conversation, so we can discuss it further. Just a few comments anyways. And also, when you work with the startups or SMEs, I wonder how long they stay with the incubator, because for SMEs to be able to thrive and be successful, it needs about 5 years, right? And most of these incubation programs have a limited number of years, and there's so much pressure to produce numbers and show success stories and all that. If I have the opportunity to sit at tables, of course, I worked as a young expert also with the business, job creation and entrepreneurship cluster of the African Union, European Union Youth Cooperation Hub. So I was able to advocate for some of these things, but I also like to share here. So for 5 years, you need to work with them before, but then all this comes in because funding is pushing for results to show. So I don't know how you're able to balance all the numbers you have there with the actual efficiency of the SMEs and the startups. Like I said, it's just comments and thoughts I'm just putting out there, right?
No, thank you for those comments and thoughts. I think I can add to that a little bit. First of all, I agree. Business development support and technical support goes hand in hand with funding. That's how we've seen it, and that's how it should be structured. With regards to your second point about the time that we work with our startups, so officially throughout our programs, the first program that they can enter into, which is a Venture Lab program, takes about a year. It's a 12-month program, by the end of which we always dream that they're all perfectly fundable. Reality has it, it's not the case, as you say. We have a follow-on program, which is another year and a half, so 18 months. So in total, over the course of those venture programs, we can have them in our, let's say, direct active portfolio for 2.5 years after we would like to see them funded, which often takes a bit longer, sometimes it doesn't. But I think what we don't acknowledge within that time span is that we often also already work with these companies or soon-to-be companies from the point that they're in university. So we've had companies coming into our organization that we've had an ongoing conversation with for a year or two to help them think about, okay, what is the right point of entry timing-wise for you, and where do we see ourselves most efficiently and actively provide you with value from that point onwards. And that point beforehand is either supported by university, sometimes there are grants, and then afterwards we see ourselves coming in. So the actual timeline, I would say, is a lot longer than the 2.5 years that we have them in our program.
Okay, that's fine. And to my last comment.
The panel that will come after that will actually go into that.
Great.
So we have a really amazing group of people. That
Great, thank you.
Also happy to discuss after the event.
So, and And really to put it out there, the reason we are discussing is exactly what you're expressing. The timing, how long it should be, how we can build concrete companies, but that also goes together with the contextualization. So we could have Arnold answering a lot of questions today about what's very specific, but he will never be able to pinpoint what exactly works in Ghana or Kenya or Tanzania, and not even what happens between Nairobi and Mombasa. And that's exactly why we have some really competent panelists, together with Arnold at some point, in front here. Now, audience, you'll give us a little bit more time than when we were supposed to end, because we have a very short injection to just give very concrete examples of some of the companies. We've collaborated with BioInnovate, and we have a company here, Alemu. You can come up to give some examples of how you've built a company in Ethiopia, and you have aspirations of going to East Africa, going beyond your boundaries, again, ecosystem collaboration. And then at some point I'll invite you, Yane, but let me start with Alemu here to quickly say, Alemu, you have 2 minutes, okay, and then I'll ask you 1 or 2 questions.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you really for giving such kinds of beautiful time, and Julius. In fact, my name is Alamu Tasfaye from Addis Ababa University. You might have heard that, no? The other thing, I worked more than 25 years in Addis Ababa University, but I have already started from the initial time where I learned my MSc in different country, my PhD in different country. I have to really develop a product for my country before leaving to this earth. So that, I started then collecting microbes and isolating, characterizing, identifying. Then finally, I developed the product that, we have a problem of coffee wilt disease in East Africa. So that, we developed Triasper biofungicide from Trichoderma product. After 18 years almost, we develop such kinds of beautiful product. You are not supposed to really worry about that. You have to put in your pocket also. This is host specific. So we isolated from the place where, the infection of wilt diseases. This fungus is really synthesizing, degrading cellular structure of the fungus that are infected the coffee wilt. So finally, we have established Kappa Biocontrol Agro-Industry PLC under the University Incubation Center. Then we have got various funds from BioInnovate Africa is one of the most, ICP. The other thing, Addis Ababa University, Ethiopian Agriculture Institute, others funding agencies already we secured. So this this is our product is really in the market, but the only thing is what we have is the policy, the one which is rolled down and also mentioned. They are not knowing about biofertilizer in the country. There is no proclamation so far. Even I went to the ministry and I told them, you are really secure yourself to import insecticide, fungicide, herbicide from the other country. But the only thing that we have developed biocontrol, you are not worried about biopesticide. Finally, I told them, then they said, okay, try to just develop a proclamation for this. In fact, we are not in the position to develop the proclamation with the justice people, so that we have developed directives. Now it is for the first time we develop to get license short fast track registration in Ethiopia. So that it is very difficult. In fact, you are not supposed to really get product within 2 or 3 years. We went through 18 years. As Dr. Julius Ikuru knows that very well. We are struggling to get the product license, but we have IP, intellectual property from Ethiopia. We are already started registration in Uganda as well as in Kenya also. We have collaborators with us. I think if anybody is going to really ask, I can just also tell something about but it is very difficult and harassing way of getting products. You have committed and devoted and give yourself. You are not having another ambitious things, which is really, we will leave. We'll get the money, we'll get anything, we'll leave them also. We'll go, but we have to develop and just transform our country. Especially our product is, our company, our project is production of fungicide for the control coffee wilt in East Africa, our project. I'm very happy, really, I have to really appreciate, acknowledge for their devotion and commitment by Innovate Africa that has been already funded us. Thank you so much.
That was many more than 2 minutes. But I'll not punish you on stage, it's difficult. So, but I think you go a little bit into the journey you took. Teaching in a university, having an idea, working on your science, bringing a product to market, and yet you run into policy issues and challenges. How has been the funding? How easy has that come? But this time, 30 seconds.
Actually, let me tell you the fact that I have 60 MSc, 22 PhD under my supervision. Let me tell you, I have sufficient time. I'm also working on voluntarism, you know. I am the one of the also organized one, Wabe Ethiopian Association Development. I am the president, the board member, chairman, even the, I am also the president of Ethiopian Society for Microbiology, as well as Ethiopian Biological Society, and so on and so on. There are so many commitment I have beside of my family. But the only thing, how I used to really manage my time, I used to sleep 2 to 4 hours. That is sufficient. Others are really wasting all your time, really. I used to eat and just share my time in all aspects. But the only thing, funding is one of the problems that exist. In fact, I used to write a project proposal day and night. I failed in somewhere. I used to really get it. In fact, the one which I failed for 2 organizations, I got from BioInnovate. That's the same project, but I formulated in such a way. In fact, I got BioInnovate first, second, and third also.
30 seconds.
Yeah, 30 seconds. You'll be blessed from the.
Now you've passed the time. But I mean, the reason we are talking with Tasfai here is he has a product on market, and you know, when I read about his story, for us it gives a very interesting perspective of how an ecosystem for a product like this looks, from the lab, from a man that has been teaching and teaching others for many, many years. But how do you bring that all the way to the market? And what are some of the hurdles? I know you could talk more about the hurdles, but we don't have time. He's here. After the event, let's discuss. Yane.
Let me give you 1 minute at least.
No, 30 seconds.
Byproduct of this, I used to really produce this from waste. I collected the waste and just give the fungus also synthesize it, and then different types of incubation, fermentation, and so on and so on. So there are so many things. In fact, if the time is there, I can present. So that, the waste of this byproduct is also, I'm trying to really produce biofertilizer. This is a beautiful one. The one which is, we are really securing from Ukraine or Russia is really, we can produce biofertilizer. This is a biofungicide. By insecticide, also I'm just on the way to plan also to produce. So that, you can ask me whatever you like.
Perfect. I'm really enjoying what you're saying, so it's difficult to stop you, but thank you so much. That's fine. Please give him a hand. Yane, you are now advising a lot of companies at BII because of your experience building companies within pharmaceuticals and biotech. But you are also a founder. Could you start from the founding journey? How you started, what motivated you, what you've built, and then you end up into some overall observations on how the ecosystem has been fundamental. I mean, it's many things, but I know you can handle this.
Thank you. And I've got 2 minutes. Good. Thank you. I'm Jana, and to start with, I have a disclaimer. Africa has a special place in my heart because when I was 7 years old, my parents took me to Uganda, and I went to school in Jinja for 2 years. The family went back to Denmark, and then my dad obviously had a very strong connection and longing for Africa, so he took us back, and this time to Nigeria. So having tried both East Africa and West Africa, and there we were at school as well, my sister and I. So Africa has a special heart here, and therefore I think this way of thinking, how can we work closer together? My dad came here as an aid worker. I hope to be able to also bring something back and contribute. So part of that is my founder journey. I am in the bioeconomy. I am chairman of 3 companies that have been through the Bio Innovations Institute program. Actually, one is currently also in. One of them I'm a co-founder of is Evodia Bio. You saw that on the screen earlier, where we make aromas from fermentation, and aromas that can make a non-alcoholic beer taste like a real beer. And I met up with the university scientists, and they came to me with the idea, and they sort of pitched it, and I talked with them on other ideas in the past, and I said, oh, that's not going to hold, and that's too difficult, and so on. But with this particular idea, they came and said, we think we've got something. And I said, yes, you have something. And this was before they put the patent in. This was before the business plan was made. And I said, I want to be part of it. So I'm a co-founder of Evodia Bio. We are 3 years old. We have just launched the first product. We have raised 13 million euros in those 3 years. But that has only been possible through the incubation of the Bioinnovation Institute, because we received the initial Venture Lab program, as you saw there, with €500,000 to get us started, to put the team together. We are 4 founders, so we hired, and the founders were a little bit wary about my suggestion to get a CEO, a commercial CEO in from day one. So actually 3 months into our existence, we got a CEO with a commercial background. And she's doing a fantastic job and has shown to be real good value, because taking the translation from science to the market requires that you, if you're the scientific founder, that you sort of change your point of view and see, okay, what is the real need in the market, and what is nice to have, what is neat to have, and so on, and how do we actually get it in the hands of the customers. So that part of the journey was very early on, but made possible through the Venture Lab program. We then sort of graduated, you can say, into the Venture House program, where we got additional 1.3 million. And that made it possible for us to raise an additional 13 million euros through a Series A round with external funding. So now we have a number of professional investors in, venture investors. So it's a nice story to be able to show that this is actually possible. And through the incubation, through the mentoring programs, through the network, and all the things that Arno was talking about, it actually works. Because this is one, I'm also chairman of Chromologics, which is a company in red color, natural red colors from fungi, and I know somebody here with fungi. And now I'm in a new one that is in the program. So it actually works. So how do we actually then take this to the bigger picture of how can we work together? And yes, there is no doubt about it, and these are the questions we had before. Funding. You need to have the necessary funding to prime it. But I think to give the people who will come with this funding the right framework, the right story, the right opportunities, is a way of getting them to put the money in. And I think the BII have shown that the acceleration of a 5.6, almost 6 times money, so they have put money in to get something started, but we that are starting it, we have generated much more. So we got 1.6 million from the Bioinnovation Institute, and we have raised 13. So we have almost 10 times money into the ecosystem. And that's how you can sort of pump, prime, and get things moving. And that is the beauty of it. So finding the right story, finding the right opportunities, looking to work with BioInnovate Africa, with Growth Africa, with all the locals here to say, this is the ecosystem. We can channel this setup and system in this way if we get the sufficient funding. And that is the story that we are trying to build together with you to say and come back to the people that have the power to say yes. And the momentum is there. The fact that Bioinnovation Institute is actually sponsoring part of this event and being here is a accreditation of that this is something that we want to do. And that's why I'm here, because it is very close to my heart. Was that something in 2 minutes?
Many more than 2 minutes, but thank you so much for the general story. Now, you are not looking to bring in a product here from all your companies. Why?
Well, my investors, and that they see my business plan, and I can see that there are more customers with more money, more willingness to pay in US and Europe. So from a startup point of view, it will always be Europe and US being the first markets. So we will not have this as our beachhead market. That being said, though, being here, I have a meeting with Diageo locally about them taking some of our products. So maybe there is an opening gap on that.
So being here opens the gap. I think this is going somewhere I like, but let me bring you back to the difference between Tesfaye and Jan's story. And I think I don't even need to talk about what he talks about, the 1.6 and what that has done in relation to bringing more money into his company, but also the facilities put in to make sure that this company actually succeeds. It makes a lot of meaning. And I think this is what we are also trying to look at. The question is, if BII, or let's talk about other people that are engaging in this ecosystem, how can we move from being siloed to, I'm going to work here, and that's my expertise, to seeing what I'm working at as a part of a bigger. So even though I'm not going to work at the university level to generate ideas, or I'm not going to work at funding Series A, Series B, how can I lay out a plan that connects into the next and that connects into the pre? Those were the two very quick examples that we wanted to give of companies. And Yane, we will again call you back for more commentary. Now, gentlemen, we are a bit delayed, and we will hope that you give us a little bit more time, because we have an even more interesting panel coming up. Now, let me request Dr. Tony, and I'm going to, young people normally don't send old people. Let me request you to take your chair, and if you can't, I'll come help you to the stage. Stephen, Enos, and Katuchi, please come up and join, go to the stage up here with your chair, and if you can't, I'm gonna take it. But let me see if the muscles work first. That's perfect. And Arnold, yes. Arnold, you've taken yours. Perfect. And this is where I end, gentlemen and ladies. I'll hand over to my very good colleague, Ian, to introduce you to this panel.
Yeah, now all the excitement starts, and we're going to make some of these conversations come true. So, because we're short of time, I'll let you each do a micro introduction of yourself, and then we'll punch quite into the questions and keep them as punchy as possible. That's a challenge. It's almost like pitching, micro pitching, all of that. Tony, yes.
Tony Omansa is my name, currently serving as CEO of Kenya National Innovation Agency, set up for developing of the innovation ecosystem. So all we've been talking about, that's what I wake up every day to try and figure out, how do I pull together the key stakeholders in the various components to greater value of creating jobs, enterprises, and societal transformation.
That will skip you, Anna.
Yeah, you've heard me.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Enos Weswa. I'm a 2-times founder. I'm currently the country director for the UK Kenya Tech Hub, trying to work with tech entrepreneurs to connect them to market, finance, and talent.
Thank you. My name is Katuchi Kasandi. I work with the Lemelson Foundation as a consultant in the entrepreneurship and innovation practice. And the Lemelson Foundation harnesses the power of innovation to accelerate climate action and to also solve global challenges.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, good afternoon. My name is Stephen Gugu from Victoria Ventures. We're an ecosystem development partner. We do 3 things. I should start by ROI. We exist to democratize access to capital. And we do that through running programs which are focused on bringing entrepreneurs closer to investors or investors to entrepreneurs. We also run an angel network called the Victoria Business Angels Network, which makes investments to early stage opportunities. And then we do some advisory work that is related to our mission, which is democratizing access to capital. Thank you.
Good. We punch straight into Tony. You've been a champion and deeply invested in how can we bring research to commercialization and how can we bring academia into a conversation that otherwise typically they're not part of. How do you see and how do you propose and what are you working on? What would be the kind of punchy things that you say you are seeing us push forward on that agenda to make that happen?
Thanks very much. I'm normally very energetic. Today I'm not as energetic because I traveled a bit too much and I'm trying to get back to normal. So first of all, I had an opportunity to look at the EU innovation agenda and it just surprised me that it maps very well to what we've been trying to do. We started off by putting a kind of like an innovation master plan. What are some of the inputs that we need to sort out over the coming years? And we came out with capacity enhancement, access to markets, access to funding, infrastructure enhancement, and policy issues. And as I look at the pillars of the EU innovation agenda on the innovation ecosystem, innovation management, knowledge exchange, including tech transfer, access to finance and human capital, it seems like we all see the same. But let me start by saying that you see collaboration as we think about triple helix or quad helix or whatever, it is informed by the players on both sides seeing their complementary value and being able to engage at about the same level, conscious that they are bringing in specific value and they have a common goal. Now, if they don't speak at the same level, then you probably don't get as much output as we would desire. And that informed why we prioritize spending a lot of time with the academia space, building the policy issues, the leadership capacity, entrepreneurial leadership capacity, ability to reform their policies, thinking through the teaching and learning, the leadership internally, and also piloting R2C. So we've worked a lot with Victoria Ventures around commercialization of research outputs. And I would say that the issue has not been availability of research outputs that are commercializable. It has been that the system was not designed to push this as much as possible to the right audiences. And with that in mind, the work had to be done around capacity, around piloting, demonstrating results, and so on and so forth. And we've made quite some considerable progress. I mean, I would see some of the projects that we would showcase now look like what we've just seen here. And so if I had to retire tomorrow, I think I would say that we made a contribution to that destination. Now, in a nutshell, then I would say that the issues of technology transfer remains a priority. And part of it has to do with capacity development, building some stronger capacity around the ability to commercialize and do technology transfer. That to me is a major issue. The other bit for me is capacity building around the leadership and the ecosystem of the education sector. Hand-holding some projects that are valuable so that you show results. It's super valuable. Then I think of funding around the seed funding space. There's an opportunity there to make a significant contribution. And then bringing the industry closer. And I think what Victoria Venture does is a strategic value. I see those as some key things that we need to work on over a couple of years down the road.
Yeah, so one thing is we make sure that Tony's not retiring. And Stephen, so that's a kind of perfect segue into you. You get 3 opportunities that you've seen from your work in terms of research to commercialization with the ventures, the business you've worked with? 3. Punchy.
Wow. Well, the one we saw here is actually part of the ones we're looking at. There's quite a number of bio-based fertilizer, biopesticides. We also have things in the renewable energy space. But let me just maybe make the question a bit broader in terms of the opportunities. Because I think the market is really huge. And just picking 3 would not be doing justice, right, to what we're looking at. So for me, when I look at the opportunities that we want to sort of like commercialize, one of the key things I would do rather than looking at the 3 is focus to, I think the point you're making earlier about the ecosystem is just have some proper funding. You know, I listened to the conversation. The startup that you spoke about received 1.3 million euros over a 3-year period. Our startups in the R2C are doing a 6-month acceleration, and the only hard cash they're getting is $5,000. Yeah? And so we've had a total of 38 innovations. Those 38 innovations have been able to raise $600,000, but the only seed funding they've gotten is $5,000 per, not all of them, actually only 20 of them have gotten that $5,000. So for me, in terms of an opportunity, I see lots of opportunities in all the innovations that I'm working with, but I don't see that I'm spending enough time on them to be able to showcase those opportunities to the market, for them to raise money, for them to go to the market, right? But broadly, there's so many opportunities in the agri, in the renewable energy space, and so forth. And yeah, I'm going to stop there. And I have to say that we're doing the program together with Tony, and I'm really happy because of the work that he's doing. And we don't want him to retire because he's doing some really good work at the top, which then ensures that you can push these innovations from the ground up all the way. Thank you.
Super. And Arno, then you coming in a little bit with the picture from outside. Is there any trends or the development that you're seeing from happening in Denmark at a global level in the research to commercialization space that might inspire us over and above the lack of money? We always know that we're working very leanly, so yeah.
I think one of the trends that I've spotted actually goes into the lack of money, but trying to address it in a sense. As I think the industry is currently at a point where they've acknowledged that it's not cheap to develop these solutions. It's even less cheap to actually commercialize them, and you need to get them to a point where they can actually operate at a level where they have favorable unit economics, which allow them to have some level of price parity. Because however much you want it, a green premium in a lot of instances doesn't really exist. And one of the trends that I've seen as a result of that is that a lot of companies have been looking more in the enabling technology space, finding, for example, cheaper bioreactors to do preliminary testing with on the smaller scale before you actually spin out a university, drastically cutting the cost of the type of experiments and the type of test runs that you need to do to come to a point where you're actually investment ready. On top of that, there's a massive push for example, cheaper kits to do genetic modifications, anything to basically enable research to either go faster and be cheaper.
Good, and it kind of segues a little bit into collaboration. And we use the word ecosystem all the time, and we use it whether it's there or not, and at least we talk about it as an aspiration. And Katuchi, you having worked, and in principle working with creating some of these structures in terms of collaboration ecosystem, what is it that we need to do to leap forward and look beyond our self-serving needs that we traditionally have a little bit of a tendency of doing, if we were to be very honest?
One of the things that I would say is to piggyback on what Dr. Tony has said. It's important for us to have shared visions, and sometimes those shared visions would come from the Kenya Innovation Master Plan or the AU agenda, to just ensure that everyone is able to see themselves in this bigger vision that is beyond them, and then they are able to identify how they fit in, and they can be able to work together within a framework. Related to having the bigger visions and agendas that are able to provide a framework for engagement, I would say that it's also important that as you are working within that bigger vision, everyone wants to make sure that beyond just attributing some of the impact to the work, they can also show how they are contributing to a bigger agenda. And the only way that you can be able to track how you're contributing to this bigger agenda is that you need an ecosystem level framework that enables you to share the metrics that you're contributing to it, and then when you're speaking to funders, maybe be able to make a case for a broader market for the work that you're doing. And you cannot be able to say, make a case for the bioinnovation economy in Kenya if you're not tracking as a collective how much it's contributing and say these are the gaps. So also having like ecosystem level metrics that enable us to track our contribution and start making a case for the market, the size of the market here, because that would not only inform policy, but it also helps us inform funders who are looking to move into this market in terms of where the gaps are. Lastly, around that, I would say, even listening to, was it Alama from Ethiopia? There are things that as an entrepreneur, you cannot solve as an individual, or even as an institution, you cannot solve as an individual. One of them is the policy that you've mentioned. And when it comes to those, it's really important for us as innovators or as the institutions that are supporting innovators, for us to map out what are some of the things that we can be able to do as individuals, but what are the things that we need to align within a collective entity for us to be able to influence together, then track the impact collectively. And one of those areas is policy. One of the other areas that I had even BII mention was infrastructure. Like some of the infrastructure that is involved in bioinnovation economy is very expensive. And for you to actually be able to tap into it, you have to think about where can we get some of those shared spaces that we can leverage as a collective for us to do individual work and get collective impact. So I would highlight those four. Yeah.
Good, Anina, you're going to then be put on the partnership track here. So partnership be another word that might be covering some of the same for collaboration ecosystem. But you're really working in that partnership space. What is it that you're seeing that international institutions like the UK Tech Hub and similar could be bringing, that you see these are the gaps and really where you have an opportunity and you're like-minded, have an opportunity to step in and be part not only of the conversation but the action?
Thank you, Ian. And I think it's quite interesting to have Tony and Stephen in this panel, because I think we work with them and you, Ian, on project as an organization. I hadn't said that the UK Kenya Tech Hub is funded by the British government. And what I think we try to do is first, equitable partnerships, to really understand that the ecosystem has to inform you what you're supposed to do, as opposed of informing the ecosystem. And I think by and large is how we are organized again as an organization. We have a whole ST&I department where we have the East African Research Hub, which has really worked with research to commercialization and also helping the universities and bringing everyone together for this conversation. So basically we have also through the East Africa, there's evidence-driven kind of approach. So the ecosystem, as you look at it, you would say it has what we call an egg and a kitchen kind of conundrum. We just don't know what to sort out first. Because if you give someone the 13 million here in Kenya, you ask yourself, what's the market? And then you ask yourself, there's fertilizer coming from Russia, and there are people who are benefiting. Someone is going to stop it. So where's the policy? So again, I think which now brings me to the fact that I cannot overemphasize the fact that we need to have this overarching vision, and I really applaud what Tony is doing, having a national sort of master plan to really tackling this issue, because it has different facets and context that we are working in.
And Tony, so there's always somebody missing in the room. And sometimes we think there's an elephant too much in the room, but there's also people missing in the room. So in your mind, who might be missing in the room at this point that we need to bring into the conversation to really build an ecosystem and build the collaboration that we desire?
Thanks. I just don't know who is in the room. So it's a little hard to tell who is not in the room, but looking around, now that I know a few players in this space, one would be the ST&I players from governance standpoint. In this case, I'll look at the National Research Fund. I sit in the board, and there is an opportunity to influence a number of things in this direction. 2 would be the regulator, the commission. 3 would be the Commission of Higher Education. Because when you think about incentives and priorities in the university ecosystem, they influence quite a bit. Guidelines, teaching and learning and so on and so forth. I mean, definitely I would think about the ministry in some way. And in this case, I'm looking at the supply side, so to speak. Players in the supply side who then guide that ecosystem. Then I think about research institutions. I do talk to a number of CEOs across these institutions, people like Cambry, Calro, and the like. Then on the demand side, as it were, I would think of VCs, probably angel investors and industrialists, people participating in the entire value chain. I think probably that would be the best way to look at it, is in the entire value chain, who is missing? Once we have a conceptual framework of that model, then it'll be easy to populate.
And maybe the elephant in the room is money. So Stephen, you got a survey there. So in your mind, and from the work you've done, how do you believe that we could, some suggestion how we could mobilize some of that money that evidently is always in that top 3, not always the number 1, on what is missing for us to move decisively forward?
Yeah. So the first thing is to recognize that if you look at, especially Kenya, talk about Kenya for a second, even the continent, we attracted over $4 billion back in 2022 in funding. Kenya by itself has attracted $1 billion for startups, tech startups, in the last, from 2020 to 2022. I'm losing some sound here. So the ingredients are there, but the challenge here is that if you look at that funding, 70% of it is foreign funding. It's not local funding, right? There's very little funding that is coming locally. Now, you ask, how do we sort of get that capital going? The first thing is that I think government, and I'm going to go back to that, I know we don't like talking about it, but government has to take that risk. If I look at our R2C cohort, for instance, research commercialization cohort, they're at a place where they've come in from the university, they've done their research, they do need to build prototypes. They need that support to make sure that that prototype is addressing a specific need in the market before they can really think about scaling. Now, that risk is being met by grants. And I was very interested to see that the view that you showed in terms of how it's you support your startups. There's a field there. The first 500,000 euros is grants, right? Now, I asked myself, who's going to put in that money? Corporates should get into it, of course. They should. The corporates here, the local corporates, but they're not into it. So I think there's a huge space for government to play to be able to de-risk the innovations, so that the 13 million euros that that comes in now from commercial funders can be able to take those innovations forward, right? I think it would be hard to ask VC investors, private equity investors, and so forth to take that level of risk, because it is very risky, and that's not what they're signed up to do. So I think that's what I would say in terms of who needs to come in to be able to move things forward. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's no sign-up sheet anyway, so don't worry. Katuchi. So one of the things I think is exciting is, and perhaps the missed opportunity, is how do we leverage capital? How do we leverage funding? And you sit and you work with a number of institutions that in principle could aspire to be interested in leveraging if somebody like BII or the Novo Nordisk Foundation came and said, we're interested, but we don't want to lift this on our own. We need a buy-in from others. Thoughts on how we create this leverage and bring, because in principle there should be an ecosystem of investors and funders as well. But perhaps sometimes they don't live together. How do we create the leverage that one puts in investment and we bring others along?
Just following from what Steve was saying, around in a market like this, it's important for us to think about government funding and how government funding can play in that experimental stage. So I would say that we've seen a couple of funders, including the one that I work with, Lemelson, really providing capital that allows experimentation. Because one of the things that you have to accept is within the research to commercialization stage, research to commercialization continuum, the early stages are very risky, and most of the time, we experience a very high failure rate. And the commercial investors would never put in money where they know that they are not getting X number of returns. So it's important for other funders who have that concessionary capital to come in and support before they come in. So I'd say for the case of the government, one of the roles that the foundations could play, instead of just, for example, providing money for experimentation, is there a way that we require government to provide matching opportunity that for us to give this funding? And for that to happen, I go back to what is it that, the question that you asked me earlier, like how do you incentivize people to work beyond their silos and engage with people collectively? One of the things that we need to make sure is that we start making a case for investing in knowledge economy, in research to commercialization, because once we have that data and government is able to see a one-to-one value around, like if you invest in this, you're able to create these jobs, like some of the metrics that match with that matter to government, that then maybe that's the basis that we use to say that if you put in this funding, we can match this to get these kinds of outcomes. So I think even for us, we need to play a little bit of a role in this market to start making that case so that we can leverage it to get catalytic capital from the government and private sector. I know you've spoken about catalytic capital. It's also, at that early stage, it's really important for us to have funding that does additional things beyond, additional things like technical assistance, which I had the BII team speak a lot. So things like the infrastructure that is needed for bioinnovators is really expensive. And sometimes an investor would never come in if the business has not gone through, you know, the medium fidelity prototype, high fidelity prototype. They want all that to have happened and for you to have a minimum viable product for them to come in. So how do you have all these foundations, which for Lemelson they're already doing, investing in this infrastructure that enables innovators to get a minimum viable product that then can get into the investment space. So I would say there's a place for playing a catalytic role in building the infrastructure. There's a place for playing a catalytic role in providing incentives that enable governments to co-match the fund. And then maybe there's a place to play in supporting some of the research around making the case for further investment. And finally, and I know you do not want me to say this, but finally, I would say that there's also a need for us as an ecosystem to not just look at where we are playing, but even as we are designing instruments as funders, look at the next people within the investment value chain and find out from them what is it that we need to invest in this space to enable you to further invest in this pipeline and design program for that from that needs-based angle. So yeah.
Super, and it's not all going to be about money. So Ines, what are the other resources that could be brought in that are needed for our ecosystem to grow, and to these ventures to grow, to these entrepreneurs and these innovators to grow? We've heard a little bit of what these other things could be. And what are the kind of partnerships that you see from your experience, both as an entrepreneur, but also working with an international agency and potential partner?
Yes, so I will just make a reference to one of our projects that really is also churning out some successful companies. This is the Transform Fund. So the Transform Fund, the idea was to actually peg it to a corporate who can sort out the market or the demand, or the marketing channel. So this is Unilever and FCDO working together, and we actually even work with Rwanda as well as Ethiopia and Kenya. And what is fascinating about this sort of collaboration is that there's a clear path to market. Now, money follows market, if you ask me. And I think we need to figure out how best to enable even our startups access market as much as we want them to raise the funding and to take this product to market. So other than that, I think we've been trying to struggle to understand what are we not doing right, especially with the ecosystem. there are some indicators that we need to track, and I think that comes to the collaboration with Growth Africa and Kenya on the KIO, that is Kenya Innovation Outlook, which is a dashboard that has some very important indicators. Now, yesterday I had a meeting with the Estonian tech. Today I had a meeting with the French tech. And I think the idea is really to rope in everyone, because as development partners, I think we've been seen to be takers. And then we want just to have a more coherent way of approaching this ecosystem. Let the ecosystem tell us what we need to do, other than, and I will repeat that, other than us telling them this is what we need to do. And then, of course, the last one is the evidence fund, which is not necessarily going through to the startup, but at least trying to de-risk the risk of assumption and really getting the data and the data that is required to actually understand what is the product, what product am I supposed to build, and which market do I need to access. So that's evidence generation and research.
I love that one, absolutely, and that data piece, don't worry, we will grab that later. Anna, I was then a bit, if we're then looking at the experience, expertise that organization like BII have, and which could come to partner and work with us in an ecosystem like this. A little bit of your thoughts around how you believe that you could bring it here, and then to just then really loop it back to what Ines just said. How do we make sure that we contextualize it so that we don't have yet another supply that isn't met by the right demand? It's almost as if we sometimes are building businesses and then we put business principles aside when we use some of the very things that we're trying to bring.
No, exactly, and I fully agree with everything you've just said. It's not about us telling the ecosystem this is a framework that's going to work and it's going to be amazing. It's about understanding what's actually needed here. And from our experience, like we have a model, and it works to a relative degree in Denmark. It's also not perfect. We're still iterating upon it. And I think that's also one of the biggest lessons that we've taken it. This is never perfect. We are, in many ways, startups ourselves. And we try to continuously listen to what the ecosystem tells us to adjust our offerings and create networks that are meaningful and necessary to help them to grow, to help startups to grow. In terms of what we can bring and how we should contextualize that, I think one of the biggest starting points that we should have is starting actually thinking and concretizing about what a partnership with local organizations would look like. So a Growth Africa, BioInnovate, anybody who's deeply involved into the innovative ecosystem here, and together, as you've already briefly touched upon, actually start mapping out, okay, what are the gaps that are being observed by our own ecosystem, and from that point onwards, start thinking about what an initial offering could look like. As a short side note to that, one point of that will also just be, is also just you need to start working, and we just need to start doing it, because if we're not trying things and finding out that they don't work, then we won't find out that they don't work. And I think that's the one way to accelerate this. Just as a startup, I think, I don't know who said it again, but I think it's about breaking things, breaking them fast, and improving upon them. And I think that mindset combined with experience is something that we could bring.
Super. We're now at a point where I'm getting angry looks. I don't think you've seen it, but I have. So what I wanted to do is kind of wrap up and say 3 things that each of you would recommend or propose that we could take as actionable steps and activities. If we're not, there's no sign-up sheet, but there could be a virtual one from the panel to kind of carry forward the conversation around how we build a collaborative effort where we're putting the best of what we have forward, and really is take this, and I hope that I'm talking to the full room actually, as an effort that we could all collaborate on. It's not just the people up here, but it's a collective effort that we really could carry forward, and perhaps a bit of a test to whether the conversation today resonated or not, and what we can make out of that. But 3 things, almost pitch style, what would those three things be? And try, to the extent where you can try and build it on each other's. I don't know if I have any volunteers who want to start.
I mean, I have the microphone in my hands anyway, so maybe I can. I think from BII, I would think one of the most concrete things that could follow up out of this event, out of this trip, is formally start talking about what a partnership could look like, and start implementing that as quickly as possible. On our end, I think we also need to deeply think about which connections, networks, and things that we have within our reach makes most sense to bring here. And on our hand, that's going to require discussion to also formalize there and think about what type of framework that can be put in, so it actually makes sense, is efficient, and mostly effective. And lastly, I think the most important point that we've touched upon a couple of times already, and there's a bit about funding, and there's also a thought process that needs to be behind what we would bring in terms of that. And to do that, we need to get the right people in the room and start talking about it. And luckily enough, we're connected to a lot of the right people, in my view, and I think we should have some opening there to start talking.
Sounds very encouraging. Stephen?
Yeah. So, I said, I know it's final comments, but if I start with just this sort of like illustration, if you look at the Kenyan tech ecosystem, one of the big debates, and we had this conversation yesterday that's going on, is whether the Silicon Valley funding model has worked, right? And actually also in the continent, because a lot of money has gone to few startups and some of them have failed. Now there's many lessons you can pick out of that, but for me one of the key lessons is if we invest in companies with a lens of the West, right, will not solve the local problems, one, but then two, we won't create sustainable business for the local market, right? Now the challenge I see is if we keep bringing in money from the West to come and support us, it still retains a Western lens to a certain extent. So we really need to think about how do we invest in terms of getting our local corporates, just as BIA is doing, and the government in this case, to be able to start investing into this, right? One of the companies that we work with on our other side of the business is called HiChem. It's in the agrochemical space. So I would want a situation where HiChem is incentivized to take some of the biopesticides, biofertilizer and so forth, which they now import, to be able to take my R2C people and have them in a lab to work together to get products into the market. Yeah? Because if we keep thinking about sort of like the West sorting us out, we'll still have the same problem again. So I want to see how we can move corporates to be able to collaborate much more with the local innovations that we have. Thank you.
And I also like the fact that you're dressed in green today, so you're the only one who really got that message of bio. Thanks.
Thanks again. So for me, if I was to think about what would accelerate the market, I would say that we've kept on mentioning the word collaboration. If you look at how collaboration is formed from a place of a lot of trust and a lot of information sharing. For that to happen, it requires a facilitator who typically tends to be perceived as very neutral in the ecosystem, that is actively providing convening spaces that then allows people to break their ice and informally engage and build that trust. But beyond that, this neutral convener is regularly engaged in identifying what are some of the information that does exist within the community and circulating it to the community members so that they're up to date with what is happening. And as the neutral convener is doing this, they're also getting an opportunity to see some of the collaborative opportunities that could happen amongst the community, and they're not happening. So they're also playing an active role in making those connections. Because typically for us to start seeing collaborations yielding impact, they typically move from a place of, you start from a connection, from the connection you're building the trust, you're transitioning to collaboration, you're starting to have, you know, like very basic engagement, like for example, I'll share with you pipeline, and then from that initial basic collaboration, you actually realize you have aligned interest, you have probably aligned culture, then you're able to collaborate on a bigger project that then allows us to start seeing impact from some of these collaborations that we talk about. So I would say, for us as a knowledge economy, there is really a need for that, like platforms that enable us to have regular convenings with other partners in the triple helix model for us to build those, that trusting relationship, and also shared information amongst all of us. Then hopefully within the next few years, because we know that network development or ecosystem building is not short term, we'll start seeing some of those outcomes through partnerships, that then we can make a case for even more opportunity because we'll be tracking that.
I'll just add, because you mentioned trust. That's what I had actually written down. So I'll add something on trust and just talk about how we empower the ecosystem to have some sort of basic values that are quite critical. And if you ask me, for us to inform the donor what they need to do, and I don't like calling them donor because it negates the fact that we are equitable partners when it comes to this. So values like give before you get, values like porous boundaries, which really worked for ecosystems that have actually had great clusters. Other than that, I think tell the story of bioinnovation. Today I just got the definition of bioinnovation. I didn't know what exactly that is. But I think telling the story of bioinnovation, I mean, we've had the other week, we were with the blue economy. So the blue economy was another conundrum that we were struggling with. So I think it's really important to say what this bioinnovation is all about. And this will attract innovators into it. It will attract other people in the value chain. So again, the value chain approach. Who is playing what? Because you might be in bio-innovation and you don't know. So that's the opportunity. And then from, I think, the Tech Hub perspective, the UK Kenya Tech Hub, I think what we also try to do is try and just fill in the information gap and just using our partnerships, our channel to just talk about bio-innovation. And that's what I think. And then just start talking about it.
Super. Now I just have good news and bad news for Tony. So there's no time you can retire. I mean, look at all that work that you need to do still. So you're still around with us for a while.
Yeah, looks like I'm going nowhere. I actually had to ask Ian to help me understand bioeconomy before I show up here. And I had to do a bit of reading. What is interesting is for the last 3 or so years, the Innovation Agency has concentrated in doing things in a sector agnostic way. So building the ecosystem of the academia and and so on and so forth. And the board directed me a couple of weeks ago that now we need to shift attention to sector-based approach. Now that we have all this energy and ecosystem. So one contribution that I would like to make as an immediate outcome of this is the Innovation Agency adopting bioeconomy as one of the priority sectors effective January 2025. That I think we can deliver. So I know space has become another one that a number of people are interested and we'll be looking at a third or fourth, but most of our activities now come from January. We'll be trying to leverage the sector. So that's one. Two, I think you do need a working group of sorts. That helps you to put together what your short-term targets would be, medium-term, long-term, and so on and so forth. And third, and that's probably what you were kind of like pointing to. Third, I think we are going to need some forms of convening to assess progress and so on and so forth. Whether it will be 6 months or whatever, some kind of review based on a work plan developed by a well-thought-out working group. I think funding has just been spoken. We are in the process. I am in government, and I will tell you that it's been a tough journey trying to put together this fund that meets our needs. And before I retire, I'm like, look, I got to have a fund by all means. And so we're working on a framework to try and get that de-risking funding or early stage funding for commercialization. Then I think capacity development is going to be a major issue immediately. Like when I think about people involved in tech transfer and the depth of insight they have, I feel like there's work to be done there, and really, really deep work to be done in order for us to effectively collaborate. Finally, we've got to demonstrate results. We've got to build more like his case, that now begins to scale beyond what he's got. And let's see a few millionaires emerging out of these aspirations. Those will be my 6 pointers. I know I went over 3, but I'm a CEO of an innovation agency, so I think about it every other day.
No, this is the first time I've ever been in a panel, Tony, where nobody actually said government to you, but you yourself at the end almost as if it had to come out eventually. So thanks. I think we've overrun quite a bit. I was waiting for somebody to come and drag us out, but I hope the fact that that hasn't happened means that we're not in too much trouble.
Thank you so much, Ian. And thank you so much, our really amazing panelists, Tony, Arnold, Enos, Katuchi, and Stephen. I'm indebted to you guys. Just one more hand of applause, just to really thank these guys. And of course, thank you to Yanni and to Alimu for wonderful inspiration processes, examples, illustrations that you've given us. And thank you so much to the audience you've held 40 minutes over where we should have ended. We can't be more indebted to you. Thank you so much.